Hi, it's Nate Charles, and welcome back to the Rule of Law Brief. First of all, it's the beginning of Ramadan. To all my Muslim friends, Ramadan Mubarak. And with that, I'd like to address the so-called anti-Sharia legislation moving through Republican-controlled states right now. It's framed as a defense of American constitutional values. However, it is anything but. If you examine it closely, it reveals something far more troubling. Not just about attitudes towards Muslims, but about how power is being pursued and used in this country. I mean, let's start with reality. There is no serious movement anywhere in the United States to replace American constitutional law with Sharia law. There are no credible legislative proposals, no state houses debating Islamic jurisprudence, no governors proposing to subordinate the Constitution to religious doctrine. If someone can point to a legitimate effort to infuse American statutory law with Sharia doctrine, I would genuinely like to see it. I cannot prove a negative, but as of yet, I haven't seen any. So what problems are these bills solving? None. Let's take the Texas example. The statute says that any application of Sharia law that infringes on constitutional rights is invalid. That's already the law. Any state action, whether based on common law, statute, arbitration, or religious principles, is unconstitutional if it infringes on protected rights. Courts strike it down regularly. That's how constitutional review works. So legally, these anti-Sharia bills do nothing. Symbolically, however, they do quite a bit, and none of it is meant to strengthen the republic. On the surface, they function as direct insults to Muslim Americans. They single out one religious tradition and suggest that its adherents pose some latent threat to constitutional order. But it's even more pernicious than that. It's also an insult to America's legacy of Republican democracy. In Federalist No. 10, James Madison warned about the dangers of faction. He wrote that the latent causes of faction are thus sown into the nature of man. Human beings are naturally prone to passion, prejudice, and group hostility. Madison understood that you cannot eliminate those tendencies without destroying liberty itself. So instead of trying to remove the causes of faction, he argued that the Constitution must control its effects. And what was he worried about? He warned of situations where a majority, united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest adverse to the rights of other citizens. That's called tyranny of the majority. Madison's solution was to eschew pure democracy. He advocated for a form of government that didn't involve direct rule by unfiltered passions. Instead, he wanted a republic, a system of representation that would, in his own words, refine and enlarge the public views. The Constitution was deliberately structured to filter public passions through institutions, deliberation, and scale, precisely to prevent prejudicial impulses from being translated directly into law, which brings us right back to the anti-Sharia legislation. These are political machinations designed not only to inflame, but to capitalize on the very type of human fallibility that the framers of our Constitution designed it to suppress and control. Republican lawmakers are not ignorant of constitutional doctrine. They know these bills are legally redundant. They know there is no threat of Sharia takeover. They know the Constitution already governs this terrain, which means that these laws are not about necessity. They are about activation. They are legislative maneuvers that call upon suspicion, cultural anxiety, and resentment, and then convert those emotions into electoral loyalty. That is not governance. That is strategic agitation. True leadership sometimes requires telling your supporters uncomfortable truths. It requires pushing back when fear is unfounded. It requires defending constitutional norms, even when doing so may cost you politically. Leadership does not involve reinforcing prejudice because it energizes a base. It does not involve passing symbolic, legally meaningless statutes to validate ethnic suspicions. Madison's entire argument in Federalist No. 10 was that a republic exists to prevent those kinds of things, to prevent temporary passions from overwhelming minority rights and constitutional principles. When a political party knowingly advances redundant legislation in order to inflame cultural tensions, it is not strengthening the Constitution. It is exploiting the very weaknesses that Madison warned us about. And that should concern anyone who cares about the survival of Republican democracy, regardless of party. If your strategy depends on convincing voters that imaginary threats are real, you are not leading. You are exploiting. And we should call that out for exactly what it is.